Okay, let us start our event, this session. Today we are going to discuss sagittal plane planning, okay? The principles of deformity planning and correction in sagittal plane. And in sagittal plane, as we all discussed in our previous sessions, previous 5 sections actually, in frontal plane, the most deformities which we encounter is either it's genu valgum or it's genu varum, whether the leg goes out or inward, because it's a frontal plane deformity. Well, in sagittal plane, usually the deformity which you encounter is either called a procurvatum deformity or a hyperextension hyperextension deformity, recurvatum, or beg your pardon, either a recurvatum deformity or a procurvatum deformity. When and there is another aspect which we need to discuss in sagittal plane is the situation of the knee. Usually there is a flexion contracture of the knee, or usually there is a hyperextension in the knee. Okay, so in discussing sagittal plane, we will be discussing 4 aspects. One, the bony deformities, which can be either procurvatum or a recurvatum, and the other deformity is in the knee, and either there is a flexion contracture or there is an hyperlaxicity which will lead to an hyperextension state. We will be discussing these 4 conditions. And while discussing tibia and femur, usually in sagittal plane we use the mechanical axis to just detect the mal-rotation, mal-alignment test. Other planning is mostly done on anatomical axis. So let us first discuss the normal angles. First I will discuss the joint orientation lines. Tibia upper joint orientation line is quite straightforward, as you can all see here. It's a straight line. The tibia laterally, the tibia is straight. So you simply draw a line over the tibia, tibial plateau, that is. Then, as you can all appreciate here, the deformity, the ankle joint is a cup shaped, and posteriorly there is an overhang. So the joint orientation would be, you'll connect this line, this point, the lowest point on the anterior lip, and the posterior lip. Okay, and when you will join these, you will get the joint orientation line of your ankle. As you can see, we will connect this line, and you will connect this line. Okay, let me zoom things up for you. By connecting these 2 lines, you will get the joint orientation of the ankle, and the straight line will give you the joint orientation line of the tibia. Now, next thing is, you'll draw the mid diaphyseal line, the line which is it is a mid diaphyseal line. And now we have to see where these lines join the joint orientation lines, where this line crosses the joint. Distally, as you can see, this line has crossed the ankle line in the center. This line has divided the ankle into 2 halves, front half and a posterior half, anterior and posterior. Look what has happened over here. This line has not joined the tibial plateau in the middle. So what is the reference point? What is the point where in a normal tibia this mid diaphyseal line should meet? It is the junction of anterior fifth and posterior 4/5. What I mean to say is, if you will divide your tibial plateau into 5 equal parts, look, I've divided my tibial plateau into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and where the first 1/5 joins the rest of the 4/5, it gives us the location where the mid diaphyseal line, the anatomical axis line of the tibia, joins the tibial plateau. Okay, so now let us move to, let's first discuss the angles. So whenever we also have reference angles over here, as we discussed so many times in our nomenclature, how, look, wait a second please. Let us just first remove this. Now we will see the angle which is formed, this, what this angle will be called. Now referring back to my first lecture, the nomenclature part, we all know that the small letter is anatomical or mechanical axis. The second letter is, it will tell you the location on the bone, whether it's medial, lateral, anterior or posterior. Since here it is posterior, here it's posterior. Now the second part is whether it is proximal or distal part of the bone. So it is proximal part of the bone. So it is anatomical, posterior, proximal, tibial angle. Okay. So, or if we want to take the front angle, it will be anatomical, anterior proximal tibial angle, because I already told you, as a rule, we always take the angle as a reference which is less than 90 degrees, which always take the acute angle as our reference angle. So that's why we have taken the posterior angle. Anatomical posterior proximal tibial angle, the reference value is 81 degrees. The mean is 81 degrees and the range is 77 to 84 degrees. Now let us just see what is happening down here. Here again we have two angles, anatomical. Now anterior or posterior, you can see the anterior angle is an acute angle less than 90 degrees. So here we're gonna take anterior angle. So anatomical, anterior, distal, tibial angle, anatomical ADTA. Okay, anatomical ADTA. Its mean is 80 degrees. You can roughly take both the angles of tibia 80 degrees. Okay, the mean is again it's 78 to 82 degrees. So tibia, we draw the joint orientation lines, and then we draw the mid diaphyseal line, the anatomical reference line, and it crosses the proximal tibia where the 1/5 and 4/5 meet, anterior 1/5 and posterior 4/5, and distally it crosses the ankle in the middle, and we take anterior posterior proximal tibial angle and an anatomical anterior distal tibial angle, posterior for proximal part and anterior for distal part. Now coming to the femur, where is the joint orientation line of the femur? As you can see, the femur, the distally, the femur is a rounded structure. So how are you going to take the reference line of the femur? As you all see, as you all have seen in x-rays of patients with who are skeletally immature, you can appreciate that the this is a skeletally mature patient. Here, this is much better here. There is a growth plate in the femur distally. This growth plate, this epiphysis, is the reference joint line of femur in sagittal plane. And when the joint sagittal, when this epiphysis fuses, the growth plate fuses, the epiphyseal scar is taken as a reference. So here, this point and this point, as you all see, that these are the extremes of the physeal scar. So by joining these two lines, this will give us our anatomical, our joint orientation line of distal femur of the knee joint. Okay, and in proximally, we usually take the center of the femoral head, and we take the neck shaft line. We do not usually take joint orientation line in the proximal part of the laterally. We take the neck shaft line, neck shaft line, okay, and we take the center of the head. There is usually no joint orientation line in the proximal femur in the hip. So coming back to the original X-ray on which we were doing all the planning. They're coming. So now, usually this part is where the condyle ends and where this notch ends from the straight line in the condyle. This is usually the epiphyseal scar. So this is the point which we take our reference. And now, as we all know, that femur in the sagittal plane is not straight. It has got a bow, and this is an anterior angulation, and we have to take it into account. So we divide the anatomical shaft of the femur into two anatomical parts, the upper half and the lower half. And we draw two independent lines. We draw two individual mid diaphyseal lines. There you go. And mid diaphyseal. So if we draw mid diaphyseal line of the upper femur, of the upper half of the femur shaft, and lower half of the femur shaft. Again, the rule for drawing the mid diaphyseal line is the same. First, we mark the one point on one extreme of the one cortex. On the opposite side, then the exact center. Again, one cortex, second cortex, and exact center. And we simply join these lines, and they give us the mid diaphyseal line. And up, then we also draw a neck shaft angle. We draw a line. Here, there you go. And it is usually 160 degrees in the lateral, 20 degree above and below. The average range is this. And as you can see, you need to see over here is both these lines, the upper line and the lower line, have crossed each other at a particular angle. This angle is usually from 5 degrees to 10 degrees. Okay. mid-diaphyseal angle. It's also called a mid-diaphyseal angle, MDA, and it is usually from 5 degrees to 10 degrees. And coming to the most important part in the sagittal plane is this angle, the reference angle of the distal femur. And as you can also see, appreciate over here that the posterior angle is lesser than the anterior angle. This is the acute angle, so we will be taking this angle as our reference. Again, anatomical, posterior, distal, femoral angle. Anatomical, posterior, distal, femoral angle, and it is usually 83 degrees is the mean, 79 to 87 degrees is the range. The population mean is 83 degrees. And so it's easier to remember in the sagittal plane because the distal tibia is anterior. Along the knee, both are posterior. Knee is posterior. Sorry, I said distal tibia. The knee is posterior. Ankle is anterior. All you need to remember this. Another thing, the angles in the tibia are 80 degrees and femur is 83 degrees. Okay, so the planning of sagittal plane, once you understand the joint orientation lines and the concept of knee soft tissue importance in the knees, the deformity planning in sagittal plane is not that difficult. So what we have accounted so far is what we have calculated here so far is one, the posterior distal femoral angle, and the other is the mid diaphyseal angle, the angle which both the diaphyseal lines make with each other, and the neck shaft angle. Again, the most of the planning in lateral sagittal plane in femur is concerned with the diaphyseal angles and the posterior distal femoral angle. In okay, hello, Satar.
Sir.
Yes, is there any problem?
Sir, there is a question about the proximal joint orientation line of the femur.
I told you in sagittal plane there is
There is a
yes.
poor connection, maybe voice problem there.
My voice is not clear.
No, it's clear now. There is a question about the proximal joint orientation line of the proximal femur.
Okay, give me 1 minute.
Yeah,
I will improve the speed of my internet. I know I'm having some problems. That's why I could not do the session. One of the problems was I was having some problem with my internet connection. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we won't be.
Now.
Yeah, now I have switched my network to my mobile's hotspot. Now hopefully we won't be having any problem. Okay, now Satar, please repeat your question.
Sir, the question is about the joint orientation line of the proximal femur.
Okay.
Is there anything like
this? No, that's I told you there is no importance of the proximal joint orientation line of the femur, of the hip. Okay, there is no joint orientation line in terms of deformity planning. Of course, if you want, you can always draw a joint orientation line of your proximal femur, because all you have to do is you need to connect the center of the head to the center of the greater trochanter, but it does not really have got any significance. The reference point which you take in the proximal femur is basically the neck shaft angle, And the main concern, the main thing that you need to see here is the mid-diaphyseal line, the mid-diaphyseal angle, and the distal, proximal distal femoral angle. As we move towards the later section, when I'll show you different cases, it will come clearer to you. All you need to remember while planning the sagittal plane is keep an eye on this neck shaft angle. Number 2 is mid-diaphyseal angle. Number 3, posterior distal femoral angle. Number 4 is posterior proximal tibial angle. And number 5 is anterior distal tibial angle. Okay? I hope I'm clear by now. Are there any questions so far?
Yes. No, sir. No further.
Okay. So now let us discuss a few other aspects, and then we'll move forwards. I'll show you a few cases of deformity, and then while seeing this, you'll be able to realize what I'm saying. Okay, so now we have got this 3 different tibias. Okay, let's first draw the lines. There are a few of you have unmuted yourselves. Please everyone mute yourselves. Okay, that's nice. Satar, you can unmute yourself if you want. Okay. So now let us first draw the lines. The mid-diaphyseal line. Sorry. So we have drawn a mid-diaphyseal line. It has made the angle of 81 degrees in the distal tibia. The anterior anatomical anterior distal tibial angle is 81 degrees, and here it is 80 degrees. The proximal posterior tibial angle is 80 degrees. Okay, this is also the mechanical orientation line. Okay, the anatomical axis line and the mechanical axis line both are the same in tibia, both in sagittal and frontal plane. Okay, so now let us draw the joint orientation lines over here. Again, if we want to draw the mechanical axis line, we're going to do the same. We're going to divide, we're going to divide the upper tibia into 5 halves, and where this line meets, the 1/5 and the posterior 4/5, and distally when in the middle, exactly at this point, this gives us also the mechanical axis line. And now we can see the angles. The anatomical distal tibial angle here is 70 degrees. The normal is 80 degrees, so it is 10 degree less. So it means there is a you can all see here is, let me just remove this line. Now we can all see the posterior proximal tibial angle is again 88 degrees. Both the angles are disturbed, so it tells us that the deformity is somewhere in the middle. Because both the angles are disturbed, the basic rules are the same whether we are discussing the frontal plane or the sagittal plane. Now what will we do? We can do two things over here. One is simply draw two reference lines at the standard angles. Another line again at 80 degrees. And this will give us the deformity. Or the other option is we can simply, first we can draw the mechanical, the mid diaphyseal lines. You can see this is more or less the mid diaphyseal line, and we can extend it. Then we can draw another mid diaphyseal line, and we can extend it. Where these two lines meet, they will give us the chora. And when these two lines meet the joint orientation lines, if these reference angles are normal, then it will mean that the deformity is only in the middle part. As we discussed in our scenarios with multi-apical deformities, as you all knew, when we joined the mid diaphyseal lines, and when those lines joined the joint orientation lines, the joint orientation line was also disturbed. So it told us that the obvious deformity is one deformity, and there is an intra-articular deformity as well. So here, when we simply drew two joint orientation lines, and they not only gave us the chora, they also when they joined the joint orientation line, our joint orientation lines, they also told us that whether the joints are normal or not. So in this scenario, we can see that there is only one deformity, and it's a mid diaphyseal deformity with magnitude of 21 degrees. Let us quickly rehearse the rules of osteotomy here as well. I'm going to draw a mid diaphyseal. I'm going to draw here the bisector, a bisector line. It's going to give me an ACA, an angulation correction axis. And when I'm going to do an osteotomy, and I'm going to do an opening wedge, this is going to simply correct not only the deformity, but also the mechanical axis. The axis orientation has been restored, joints have been restored. So let us quickly move to our third scenario. Here again, we will draw first the joint orientation lines. Star, can you hear me fine now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, please mute yourself. Again, a line joining the anterior 1/5 and the middle. Here, please keep in mind, I'm not trying to meet to bisect this line in the middle. I am crossing this line where there is apex. Okay, so keep this in mind. The apical part, I'm crossing the apical part because there is an angulation. If I attempt to bisect my line, so I will cross posterior to the ankle. So I need to pass in the center portion of my ankle. Okay, now this has given me the posterior proximal tibial angle is 83 degrees, and the anatomical anterior, the anterior distal tibial angle is 104 degrees. So it means both the angles are disturbed. So there must be a deformity in the middle. So now we will draw two mid diaphyseal lines. We've drawn two mid diaphyseal lines, and in the middle, and we will again draw the second mid diaphyseal line. Okay. We have drawn two mid diaphyseal lines, and they meet where the obvious deformity is. So these two mid diaphyseal lines have given us the chora and the magnitude of deformity of 40 degrees. As you can all see here is, we will check the posterior angle. The posterior proximal tibial angle have come here is 81 degrees. So it is normal. So which tells us the obvious deformity is the only deformity. There is no deformity in the joint, and the anterior distal tibial angle is 81 degrees. Again, it is normal. So this is the only deformity. So we will simply correct it using our different rules of osteotomy. Are there any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay, it was quite straightforward. Let us now move to the femur. Okay. Now here I'm only discussing the diaphyseal part. Okay, then later on we'll come to the distal part as well. Here first let us assess in the middle. Sorry. Let us simply draw. Here, since it's a sketch, only to teach you, when we'll go to the real X-rays, then we'll be able to draw things a bit better. Here, this is just to show you. As you can see over here, I've drawn a more or less, if you just ignore this part, just look at this part. The diaphysis, which is in the lower part of the femur, you will not take this part as a reference because it's a metaphyseal diaphyseal junction. So here it is not, bone is not, this is not the diaphysis. You'll take the reference angle from this part. Okay. So you'll draw the mid diaphyseal line here. Then you will draw the mid diaphyseal line of your proximal femur. Okay, and now again you'll draw your neck shaft angle. Okay, so this is your normal planning. There you go. So all the angles that you need to know here is the anatomical anterior neck shaft angle, then the mid diaphyseal angle, okay, which is 8 degrees over here, and then the proximal distal femoral angle, which must be the the population mean is 83 degrees, and the range is from 79 to 87 degrees. And here we have got an angle of 84 degrees. Okay, So the middle femur is normal. Again, one thing that you can also do over here is you can also draw a mechanical axis line. One thing which I forgot to tell you, what is the point where the anatomical axis line will join the distal femur? When we all do DCS, we pass our lag screw where the anterior 1/3 meets the posterior 2/3 in this supracondylar, in this condylar area. So this is the reference point in the distal femur, and it is evident over here. If you, the anterior 2/3 is the anterior 2/3 are of the condyle are where the femoral shaft is, and the posterior 1/3 is the overhang of the condyle. If we just ignore the posterior 1/3 of the condyle, the anterior 2/3 of the condyle are in line with the femoral shaft. So the anterior 1/3 and the posterior 2/3, where these 2 points meet, they give us the point where the anatomical axis, the reference mid diaphyseal line, should meet the femoral, the joint orientation line of our distal femur. So let us now come examine. I told you that you can also draw the mechanical axis of the femur. The mechanical axis of the femur, the lateral, the posterior distal femoral angle of this is both in anatomical and mechanical are the same. Okay, so if you get a disturbed angle, you can know that there is some problem. So the mechanical axis of the femur can also be drawn, but it will only tell you the first answer, the mal orientation test, that is there any deformity in the femur or not. All the planning you need to do on the anatomical axis planning. So let us come to this femur now. Again, we're going to draw the first the joint orientation line. Okay, more or less this is the part. Then we're going to draw a mid diaphyseal line. This is the diaphysis, so we're going to take this part as a reference. We're not going to take reference points from this part. Okay, then we're going to draw our proximal line, and where this line is going to meet the, where this line meets the lower mid diaphyseal line is the cora. The magnitude of deformity is 28 degrees. Okay, so here, if well, let me show you one thing. Now let us just correct the deformity. I've drawn a bisector. Just simply going to open up the hinge, and now both these lines have been joined. So, but we know that usually there is a mid diaphyseal angle of 5 to 10 degrees. Okay, so we need to extend it a little bit in our planning, and then we'll check the angle. The angle is 6 degrees, so I will stop anywhere in between this, because this is again the creating of 5 to 10 degrees of angle. You don't need to confuse yourself, because if you have
internet problem,
there is an internet problem. You can't hear me? Hello, Sitar, can you hear me? Can you listen to me?
Please repeat all this again.
Which part do I need to repeat? Sitar, which part do I need to repeat? Okay, I'll repeat. I'll simply repeat it. Siddharth, which part do I need to repeat?
Before osteotomy.
Okay. So I think you heard me where till when I drew the mid diaphyseal lines, you were listening to me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I have drawn the mid diaphyseal lines. Okay, Star, you need to keep yourself unmute so that whenever there is a problem, you can tell me. So I've drawn the mid diaphyseal line of the proximal part of the femur. I've also drawn the mid diaphyseal line of the distal part of the femur, and where these two lines have joined, they have given me the location of the deformity, the chora. And again, as I told you earlier, I need to check my reference angle. By difference, the posterior distal femoral angle is 81 degrees. As you can all see over here, it is 81 degrees. Sorry, it's 83 degrees. And so it's normal. So I know that there is no deformity in the distal part of the femur. The obvious deformity is the only deformity. So then again, I told you that I'm going to correct it. The principle for correcting the deformity is the same. I will be drawing a bisector. I will do an osteotomy over this, and then I will correct the deformity. Okay, can you all hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I told you before that since both these lines are now parallel, but as I told you earlier, that there is 5 to 10 degrees of mid diaphyseal angle. So we need to create that angle as well. So what I will do is, in my planing, I will overcorrect it. By here I've corrected it to 7 degrees. Again, what I was telling you is, in this part, you really don't need to worry about this aspect, because most of the people, when there is a mid diaphyseal deformity, all of you are going to correct it using an intramedullary nail. So the nail is an anatomically contoured nail. So when you'll put the nail in, it will automatically correct the deformity. Okay, this is how you plan it. Whether you're going to take out the wedge. So let us do a closing wedge osteotomy over here rather than an opening one. Sorry. So here I plan an opening wedge osteotomy. I'm planning a closing wedge osteotomy here, and I've corrected it. So this part, this overlap part, which I told you that you can, the ways through which you can measure how much bone needs to be removed, this much bone you'll need to remove. So this planning will tell you how much wedge do you need to take, and then you can put in your nail and correctly correct the deformity. So sorry, but the third part here. Again, what are we going to do over here is, again we are going to draw reference lines, a mid diaphyseal line, a line over here, the mid diaphyseal line, This is more or less the representative of the shaft. Okay, so I've drawn the line, and the lateral distal femoral angle, sorry, the posterior distal femoral angle here is 84 degrees. Okay, so this is normal. So we know that there is no deformity in the distal articular portion of the femur. The joint orientation is okay, and the obvious deformity is the only deformity where the two mid-diaphyseal lines have joined, and the cora is at the point of the obvious deformity with the magnitude of 26 degrees. Okay, so I'll be correcting this deformity by about 20 degrees. I'll leave the 6 degrees behind the normal and the normal curvature of the normal bow of the femur. Now I'm going to move to our next section. Let's first discuss tibia. Okay, now here you have got a tibia. First we will quickly draw the joint orientation lines. Then I will draw a mid-diaphyseal line. Now I have drawn a mid-diaphyseal line. Now let us check the angles. The distal angle is the anterior distal tibial angle is 80 degrees, and the proximal posterior tibial angle is 72 degrees over here. So we know that the proximal tibia has got a problem because the lower angle is normal. So how will we calculate the cora over here? How will we calculate the deformity? We will draw a reference line with the posterior angle of 81 degrees, and we will draw it at a location here. Okay, you can also eyeball it, but here, since I have got the option, so I have drawn a line which is 81 degrees, and look here, this is given me the deformity. This has given me the location of the deformity with the magnitude of deformity is 9 degrees. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply do an osteotomy over here, and let us plan. And please mute yourself. The person who is not unmuted himself, please mute. Now, as you can see, now the deformity has been corrected, and this is how we correct the deformity in the upper part of the tibia. Now let us move to another scenario, another possible scenario in our tibia. Let us draw the joint orientation lines. Now let us draw a mid-diaphyseal line. Okay. Now let us see what angles have we gotten. The posterior proximal tibial angle is 80 degrees, about normal, while the anterior distal tibial angle is 68 degrees, abnormal. So we know that there is a recurvatum deformity in the ankle joint. How are we going to calculate the cora? We're simply going to draw a line at 80 degrees, which is the normal reference, And since we can see the joint here is the deformity, this line has crossed the middle. So we know for a fact that it is an intra-articular deformity, because our reference line is again going to originate from this part. And let us get the angulation correction axis. Let us draw the bisector of these two angles. This is the bisector of the larger angle, and look where this line is passing. It is not possible for me to do an osteotomy over here. So what I'm going to do is a rule 2 osteotomy over here. What I will do is I will simply do an osteotomy which is higher above. Then I will place my hinge over the ACA. I'm planning an opening wedge osteotomy over here. So what will going to happen is there's going to be a translation, and the deformity is going to be corrected with translation, but the mechanical axis and the joint orientation will be perfectly restored, but there will be a small amount of translation. Are there any? Yes, sure.
Sir, there's a question from Dr. Abdullah about the proximal tibial correction in the sagittal plane. If there is level, if the level of osteotomy is again at the tibial tuberosity site, then what to do?
Okay, sure. Let me show you. The basic here, I think this osteotomy has explained, because the osteotomy was at a place which was impractical for me. So I did a rule 2 osteotomy. Let us open for a minute. I still have time. Let us open the previous X-ray. Quickly, let me jump. Just to give you an idea, maybe I'm not trying to draw the lines perfectly, just to give you an idea. Let's assume that this line would have crossed over here. Okay, I think this is your question. This line has crossed over here, and there you go. Now you cannot do an osteotomy so close to the joint, and you all know this is the area of the tibial tuberosity. So what can I do now? I can simply do an rule 2 osteotomy. What usually I would do over here, I would do an oblique osteotomy to increase the surface area. I would simply do an osteotomy like this, and then I will place my hinge in the posterior cortex, or I can even place in the anterior cortex. Here, for discussion's sake, I'm going to do an opening wedge, and this is how I will correct. There will be some translation and opening. So if I want, I can even do here in practical terms. Let's speak what is going to happen in practical terms. I would prefer a closing wedge osteotomy over here. So all you need to do is you need to calculate the amount of wedge that you need to take, plus you need to slightly posteriorly translate anteriorly translate the distal femur. Okay, and this will realign.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes. Sure.
By doing these osteotomies, can we disturb our posterior slope of tibia that is naturally occurring in the tibia proximal end?
All that planning which I have been doing is to restore the tibial slope. Okay, this posterior proximal tibial angle is the tibial slope. Okay, when I say that there is a naturally occurring posterior tibial slope, what I am saying is that there is a posterior slant in the tibia. This is why the posterior proximal tibial angle is 81 degrees. Okay, it is not 90 degrees. So all of my planning is to restore the normal tibial slope. Okay, in this patient, now you can see there is an increase in tibial slope. Okay, what I will do is I will restore the normal tibial slope. Okay.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so now let us discuss the femoral part, the femoral condylar portion. Here. Now we have got a bone like this. We're going to do the same. First, we're going to draw a few lines. First, the joint orientation line. Okay. Then a representative line of the mid diaphyseus of the lower part. Then I'm going to draw a line in the upper part. Okay. The mid diaphyseal angle is 7 degrees normal, and the posterior distal femoral angle here is 72 degrees. So it is abnormal. The normal is 83 degrees. So what I'll be doing over here is, this is not reference, this is more reference, 71 degrees. Okay. So what I will do is, now I know that there is a deformity in the femur and the angle is low. So the deformity is most, and the mid diaphyseal angle is normal. So the deformity is in the distal femur. The location, I will first draw a reference angle at normal 83 degrees. And location, the location is where the anterior 1/3 and the posterior 2/3 of this line meet. And this gives us the location of the deformity and the magnitude. So again, I will be correcting it by simply doing an osteotomy. Here I've chosen to correct the deformity where my cora is. I've simply opened up the wedge, and this has corrected the deformity. What would have happened? Let us again discuss the scenario, which was the question which was previously asked. If this line would have been, if the cora, don't now start asking question that why have I not drawn the line in the correct place. I am just trying to tell you that if this were a deformity in the joint, what would have happened? Now let me draw now you can, as you can see, here is my bisector. Okay, it is crossing through the condyle. I can never do an osteotomy over here. So what I need to do now is I would simply do an osteotomy over here. I will place my hinge over the original axis. Oh, wait a second. This hinge would be placed over the normal angulation correction axis. Let us plan an opening wedge. It will be clearer to you.
Please repeat it. There was a bit problem in the voice.
Okay. So now I've just moved my reference mechanical angle, though this is the normal place, just to show you that had this line been, if this line would have met the mid diaphyseal line in the articular portion, then what would I have done? So I would have done a Rule 2 osteotomy. While I've done an osteotomy which is above, then I would have simply placed the hinge over the angulation correction axis and this way I would have corrected the deformity. Through slight posterior translation, I would have corrected the deformity and the mechanical axis and everything. Okay. Is there any question so far?
No, sir.
Okay. So now, till now, we have discussed the aspect, the bony aspect of sagittal plane deformities. Whether the deformity can be in the diaphyseal portion, it can be in the metaphyseal or a metaphyseal diaphyseal portion, and which can lead to procurvatum or a recurvatum, and how to correct it. But there is another aspect to the deformity in the sagittal plane, and it is the condition, the soft tissue condition of the knee, whether it can be a fixed flexion contracture, a fixed flexion deformity, or a laxicity leading to hyperextension. This is the other component. Now we are going to discuss this portion. Take a look at this picture. What will we do whenever we see a knee X-ray in the sagittal plane? First, we draw reference lines along the anterior tibial cortex. Okay. Keep in mind that all the plannings that you do in your the X-ray must be a weight-bearing X-ray. So if the patient must be standing, if the patient has got a fixed flexion contracture, he must be standing, and when he is standing, he is extending his knee to the maximum limit. Or if there is a hyperlaxicity, again he will be extending his knee to the maximum limit. You can't just simply just tell the patient to lie down and then take a lateral X-ray. Maybe he's just flexing the knee, you won't know. So it is very important. It is very important, all the plannings, whether in the sagittal plane or in the frontal plane, you need to take the X-ray while the patient is standing. Maybe in a later session, I'll tell you how to take a perfect scanogram. It is a very important aspect which I should have discussed in the beginning. Now I have drawn two lines. One line is along the anterior axis, anterior cortex of the femur, and another line is along the anterior cortex of the tibia. Okay, and when I have extended the line, these two lines are parallel to each other. Okay, if this line comes like this, there will be, this angle will be the amount of flexion contracture, this angle. And if this line moves to here, this will tell me hyperextension. Okay, flexion of even 1 degree is abnormal. Okay, and extension of up to 5 degrees is normal. So hyperextension beyond 5 degrees is abnormal, and flexion of even 1 degree is abnormal. So now let us see different scenarios. So there are 4 scenarios which are.
Sir, again, please.
Okay. What do you want to know? Satar, what do you want to know?
There was a voice problem. Previously, there was a voice problem. Please repeat your previous point.
Okay, sure, no problem. No problem. You all heard when I drew the lines along the anterior cortex? Okay, so quickly, let me quickly draw these lines again. Here I have drawn the reference line along the anterior line of the femur, anterior cortex of the femur, here along the anterior cortex of the tibia, and where these two lines will make an angle. If they are parallel, it's normal. If there is a degree of flexion, if the angle is in this direction, there is a flexion deformity, and if it's in this direction, there is an hyperextension. I'll show you the scenarios. It said there is an hyperextension. No amount of flexion is acceptable. I told you that whenever you'll take an X-ray for planning, that X-ray will always be a standing X-ray, a weight-bearing X-ray, so that the knee is in maximally extended position. Okay. If the knee is going into hyperextension, when the patient is going to put weight, it is going to go beyond neutral. So anything from 0 to 5 degrees in the extension side is normal, and beyond 5 degrees of hyperextension is abnormal, and even 1 degree of flexion is abnormal. Okay, have you gotten my point?
Yes.
Okay, so now let me show you a few scenarios over here. Let us first simply check how much, whether there is a flexion contracture over here or not. Okay. Let me draw the 4 lines, and then we will continue. Star, can you hear me? Here in all these scenarios, as you can see, let's discuss the first part as well. Here, look how much the flexion there is. Okay, the two lines are meeting at an angle of 26 degrees. So there is, you'll say that there is a fixed flexion deformity of 26 degrees. Look at this X-ray. Again, there is a fixed flexion deformity of 26 degrees. Same is with all the cases. In all the cases, there is a fixed flexion deformity of 26 degrees. Okay. So, but all these scenarios are different. We need to discuss all these scenarios. Okay. Let us first, how are we going to know that whether this flexion attitude is because of bony abnormality or because some soft tissue contracture? Okay. Let us draw a mid-diaphyseal line. This is a mid-diaphyseal line. Okay. And now we're going to draw. Let us simply first remove these two lines. We're going to draw. As you can see, here is the posterior tibial angle. Here is, what is the posterior distal femoral angle over here? Is It's 64 degrees. And what is the normal angle over here? It's 82 degrees. So now we all know that the deformity is it's 64 degrees. The deformity of the angle was 26 degrees. Okay, so we can see from here is the deformity is the normal 20 degrees of the deformity, 20 degrees of the flexion attitude is because of bony deformity, while the 6 degrees is because of soft tissue contracture. Let us discuss this scenario.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sure.
Sorry, sir. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, Satar. Satar, I can hear you. Yes. Abdul Satar, do you have a question?
Sorry, sir. Previously, we could not understand the previous all points due to some lag between voice
okay. Okay, this is the first. This is a very important. As I told you earlier, we are going to, in our every case of sagittal plane, we are always going to first check whether there is a flexion or an hyperextension attitude at the knee joint. Okay, how are we going to do is we're going to draw these two lines. Okay, and these two lines are going to tell us the flexion or extension attitude of the knee. Okay, so the second question is, I told you that two aspects contribute to the flexion or extension attitude of the knee. One can be the bony aspect, whether there is a bony deformity. The other aspect is a flexion contracture or a hyperlaxicity. Okay, Satar, can you hear me? Okay, so now now there can be four scenarios. Okay, four possible scenarios. One, because of bony deformity, there is a flexion attitude at the knee joint. Okay, the other aspect can be because of bony deformity of the tibia, there can be flexion attitude. The other aspect can be there the bones are normal, maybe there is a flexion contracture of the posterior soft tissues which has led to the flexion contracture. Okay, the flexion attitude of the knee. Same is with the hyperextension. There can be a soft tissue hyperlaxicity, like in the cases with a hyperlaxicity syndrome or poliomyelitis. And the other scenario is there is a bony deformity in the femur or tibia which is leading to hyperextension at the knee joint. Okay, so I'm showing you different scenarios.
Okay, sir.
In this scenario, we came to know that most of the flexion attitude of this knee was because of deformity in the femur. Okay, since the posterior distal femoral angle is 64 degrees. Okay, in this scenario, I'm not going to discuss all the scenarios, it is going to confuse you even further. In this scenario, let us simply draw quickly the mid diaphyseal lines. Okay, now here you can see the tibia, posterior proximal tibial angle is 72 degrees. It's about 9 degrees less, and the femur is more or less normal. So what I can see over here, but the magnitude of the total flexion is 26 degrees. There is 26 degrees of flexion contracture. So out of this 26 degrees, 10 degrees has been contributed by tibia, and the rest 14 degrees is because of flexion contracture, the posterior soft tissue contracture. Okay. In this scenario, I can quickly draw again the lines. The lateral distal femoral angle is the posterior distal femoral angle is 72 degrees, while it is 80 degrees. Again, in this scenario, femur is the culprit. Well, in this scenario, there is again 26 degrees of deformity. And the angle here is 55 degrees. There is extreme degree of procurvatum in the femur, the confemoral condyle. Well, over here, it is 81 degrees. So again, the culprit over here is femoral condyle. This is how you measure the flexion contracture or hyperextension. Okay, first you draw the anterior cortical lines, and you to find out how much the flexion contracture there is, and after that you draw your reference lines which tell you your bony abnormality, and whatever is left is because of the soft tissue problems. Okay. Are there any questions so far? What I want to tell you, what you need to know right now is, I need to tell you is whether, let's see, there is 26 degrees of flexion contracture, and I want to correct the deformity. Obviously, correcting the deformity will not correct the entire flexion attitude of the knee. What you need to do is, whether if it is a slight soft tissue contracture up to 15 degrees, 15-20 degrees, not more than this, you can maybe do an hyperextension osteotomy of your femur to correct the flexion contracture, and again you'll do your planning and you'll overcorrect it. If the flexion contracture is 90 degrees and 30 degrees is because of your femur, you can't just correct all the flexion contracture just by doing an osteotomy. You will need to correct the bone, and afterwards you'll also address the soft tissues as well. Okay. Are there any questions so far?
Yes, sir.
What?
No one, sir.
Okay, now let me show you a few cases which will help you. Sorry. Understand better. I shortlisted a few of my cases to show you how the deformity presents, how do you do the planning, and then how you correct them. I chose one of my case from each part of the bone. Okay, one from distal femur, one from proximal tibia, and one from ankle joint, so that you get a better understanding. There you can see in this X-ray, there is a deformity in the femur. I found out that the magnitude of the deformity is 56 degrees. Okay, and the whole deformity was not bony, there was soft tissue element as well, so I did slight degree of hyperextension as well. This is how I corrected the deformity. I did an osteotomy, I slightly overcorrected it, and then because there was an LLD as well, I did a simultaneous lengthening as well. So I wanted to show you over here is that I had to do slight hyperextension, about 10 degrees of hyperextension to correctly connect the knee. You can see there is a slight flexion because this is not a weight bearing X-ray. So again, in this scenario, you always, whenever there is a procurvatum or recurvatum at the knee joint, you not only address the soft tissue elements, you always take into consideration the soft tissue aspects as well, not only the bony aspects, also the soft tissue aspects as well. Okay. So what is happening over here? It is very evident that this patient has got a hyperextension recurvatum of the knee. Again, the causes can be soft tissue causes, maybe a ligamentous laxicity, a soft tissue laxicity, or a bony deformity. What this patient had was, he had a old Salter-Harris slip which malunited and now presented to us in this condition. There was about 35 degrees of deformity. Sitar, can you hear me? The deformity was exactly where tibial the ACA was exactly where the tibial tuberosity is. So I had to do an osteotomy, a Rule 2 osteotomy. I started my osteotomy from here, I did an oblique osteotomy over here, so that the base of my osteotomy was closest to my ACA. This is where I did an osteotomy. This is the place of the osteotomy. It was an oblique osteotomy. The hinges were placed exactly at the angulation correction axis. This was the assembly, because this patient also had equinus because of soft tissue contracture. So I decided to correct the soft tissue aspect simultaneously by close Ilizarov. And I think I have not posted my most recent X-ray. I'll show you in a while. Okay, in the end I'll show you. This is another case of ankle procurvatum. Here you can see the deformity. I drew a line at the joint orientation of the line of the ankle. Diaphyseal line was drawn, Cora was here. The deformity, magnitude of deformity was 56 degrees over here. So again, I decided to do an opening, posterior gradual opening wedge, and correct the deformity. Here the reference, the line was just to make sure that there is no frontal plane malalignment. The joint line was reference wire was passed like this, then a ring was applied. This is where my hinges are placed exactly over the angulation correction axis. This was the assembly. As you can see, the hinge is exactly at the angulation correction, at the apex of the deformity. And this is how the deformity got corrected. All of this is new bone formation. This is the reference ankle, and the foot was completely corrected. This is how the ankle deformity was corrected. Sitar, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. There was a question about the correction, correction sequence.
Yes, sure.
Correction sequence. Whether we have to go firstly correct the angulation, LLD, or sagittal or coronal plane.
No, sorry, I did not get the question. Please repeat your question. I did not get what you were trying to say.
Question is from Jawad.
Yes,
He is
sure.
asking about the sequence of correction. In which sequence we have to correct the deformity?
Okay. By sequence, what do you mean? I'm still not getting what you're trying to say. Sequence. Jawad is asking the question. Jawad, you can simply unmute yourself.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very fine.
Sir, I am asking if, let's say, there is a deformity which have both component such as angulation and rotation.
Okay.
So in what sequence we are going to correct this deformity? First angulation, or and if this patient is also having LLD, so in what sequence we should correct this deformity?
Okay, let me look. Ideally, everything needs to be corrected simultaneously. Okay, everything needs to be corrected simultaneously. If there is an angulation and there is a rotational element and there is a limb length discrepancy, or the main trick is that you need to take care where you apply your hinges. Okay, ideally all these things need to be corrected in the single setting, but because it is not always practical and very difficult, what we usually do is, because I have not told you about anything about the rotational deformities, the torsional deformities, we have not discussed so far. Okay, this is another, the rotational deformities is another topic. But what is usually done, usually first we correct all our malalignments, and when we have corrected the malalignment, then we usually derotate. Okay, this is whenever we are doing a gradual correction. Even when we use a Taylor spatial frame, the computerized frame, first we correct our angulations and in the end we correct our rotations. So this is this was the X-ray of the recurvatum patient. As you can see now, just by gradually opening, this is solid bone, new bone has formed, and the posterior tibial slope, the angle has been restored. Are there any more questions so far?
Yes, yes. There is a question from the Dr. Kudrat Niazi. Opinion on the dome osteotomy, as in case of distal femoral condyle, where you do posterior opening wedge by roll 2.
Okay, yeah, Dr. Kudrat has asked a very good question about the dome osteotomies. I have not discussed the aspect of dome osteotomy, different types of osteotomies so far, whether it's an opening wedge, a closing wedge, or a dome osteotomy. Okay, in our next lecture, for first 15 minutes, I will tell you about the dome osteotomy. Okay, the dome osteotomy is not simply that you do an osteotomy like this. There is a cora of the dome osteotomy, and there is a planning of the dome osteotomy. In our next lecture, in first 15 minutes, I will tell you in detail about the dome osteotomy, and then we will jump to our next session. Okay, so Kudrat, you need to wait for 3 days to, and then you'll know, inshallah, you'll know the answer of your question. Okay, are there any more questions?
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this concludes our session. Today I know I had some internet problems. Hopefully by in 1 or 2 days this issue would be resolved. So now today we discussed the sagittal plane malalignment, and the crux of all this session was that you always start with drawing a line in the anterior cortex of the femur and the tibia, and you check whether there is any flexion contracture or hyperextension at the knee, and afterwards you do all of your planning, and you also keep in mind the soft tissue aspect when addressing any deformity, any sagittal plane deformity, flexion or hyperextension at the knee joint. Okay, so this concludes our session. Have a good night. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.